Coming up in today's newscast, Israel retaliates to violence from Gaza by shuttering the Strip's Erez checkpoint. The Attorney General opens an investigation into Shin Bet interrogations of tourists at the airport. And just in time for summer, an Israeli ice cream guru has the perfect cure for your munchies. Despite the growing reality of a potentially imminent ceasefire deal with Hamas, Israel has reportedly just shuttered the Erez border crossing checkpoint into the Gaza Strip. Like the Kerem Shalom checkpoint, this is a crucial junction for aid in and out of the Strip, and this closure is likely the result of continued Palestinian aggression against IDF forces over the weekend. Thousands of Gazans gathered on the border Friday to launch Molotov cocktails, stones, and homemade explosives at troops trying to contain the violence. Still, this news comes as a bit of surprise considering the increasingly likely reports that Hamas and Israel are indeed reaching the final phases of a ceasefire deal. Now, the full details of that proposal, namely the suggested duration, is still under tight wraps, but Hamas officials claim that the deal is in the final stretch and will last for a full year. The terror group has apparently agreed to temporarily halt all violence against Israel in exchange for a relaxed blockade of the Strip, as well as a new cargo line between Gaza and Cyprus. Israelis are somewhat split on whether or not Israel really comes out on top with a deal like this, though. On one hand, any measures to end violence are always more than welcome, but on the other hand, Hamas violence driving Israel's hand here might be setting a very troubling precedent. Others warn that any deal that excludes leadership from the Palestinian Authority will only bolster Hamas and potentially backfire years down the road. For now, many are skeptical whether or not a deal at all will come together anyway. Until then, the unrest clearly is not going anywhere. The Secretary General of the United Nations has just presented the Assembly with a series of suggestions for de-escalating the violence along the Gaza border. But Israel has taken particular offense at one such suggestion, a UN-sponsored military force to protect Palestinians from IDF forces. Israel's ambassador to the UN has condemned this offer as delusional, countering that perhaps the UN should protect Palestinians from Hamas instead. This report, submitted by Secretary General Antonio Guterres, comes in response to the casualty rate of Palestinians along the Gaza border in recent months, a number that continues to climb. Just this weekend, IDF troops killed 2 Palestinian rioters along the Gaza border. This brings the total number to roughly 171 Palestinians slain by IDF bullets in recent months, including at least 1 journalist, several medics, children, and dozens of Hamas operatives. The world largely voted at the UN to condemn Israel for its actions. Israeli leaders, however, have remained adamant that they have a right to defend their own borders, especially given that these weekly riots were sponsored by Hamas from the very beginning. The idea of armed UN soldiers protecting Palestinians is absurd to Israelis, given the irony that Palestinian leadership has only fueled its people into acts of violence. But the proposal is a bit unrealistic for another, more bureaucratic reason as well. Such a move would require a full green light from the UN Security Council, where the United States would almost certainly use its veto power to throw out any proposal that Israel objects to. Tomorrow marks the 25th anniversary of the completion of the first Oslo Accords. Now, these agreements led to the formation of the Palestinian Authority as we know it today and formed the basis for future two-state negotiations between Israel and the Palestinians. But 25 years later, the legacy of Oslo remains a fiercely debated subject here in Israel. So divisive, in fact, that former Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin even paid for it with his own life. Here to reflect on Oslo is Dr. Martin Sherman, the founder and executive director of the Israel Institute for Strategic Studies. Dr. Sherman, thank you for joining us, as always.
Thank you.
So you've been against Oslo from the very beginning. Why do you think that those accords, those agreements failed?
Well, I think the jury is no longer out. I mean, when the Oslo agreements appeared on the stage in the early 1990s, there were proponents who promised benefits and opponents who warned of dangers. Quarter of a century later, none of the pledges of benefits have come true, and all the dangers which the opponents warned of have materialized. So I don't think there's any real argument about whether it succeeded or failed. In many ways, it was a very predictable and predicted failure. As you mentioned, I wrote a series of articles just before and just after the Oslo agreements, predicting exactly where it would go. And I think anyone who had an iota of intellectual integrity and a smidgen of the grasp of the principles of political science, international relations, the theory of the nation, knew it was going to fail. I think only people who were malevolent or imbecilic had any hope of it succeeding.
So for you, 25 years ago, it was a no-starter to begin with. There was nothing that even you would have suggested, hey, if you put this in, you take this out, maybe you've got a deal here?
Well, for Oslo to succeed, you need the Palestinians, for some as yet to be explained reason, to morph into something that they haven't been for 100 years and show no signs of being in the foreseeable future. I mean, I simply cannot understand why anyone in their right mind would want to deploy armed militia within mortar distance of your own parliament. I just cannot understand that. I do not know. I can't think of any empirical basis for its success or any theoretical rationale for its implementation. To me, it's a total eclipse of common sense.
Well, it sounds like you're talking that there's no goodwill for the Palestinians at that time. Do you think that there was goodwill from the U.S. as a negotiator, or from Israel at the time, who was on the other side of the table?
I think there was. If you call goodwill naivety, perhaps there was. But it was Henry Kissinger who said that Israel has no foreign policy, only domestic policy. And I don't want to sound too conspiratorial, but I think in many ways this was an initiative by the left wing to neutralize the relevance of their right-wing political opponents. Because if Oslo had been a success, there would be no real rationale for right-wing ideology which talked about the land across the 67 lines. So in many ways, I think there's a basis for saying that if the left believed it would succeed, it was naivety, and if they didn't, it was a very cynical domestic ploy. But I think today what you're seeing is basically Oslo is still on the table, and I think this is a result of a dangerous and delusional left wing and an incompetent and impotent right wing, and because the right wing in many ways has embraced many of Oslo's principles, despite it being vindicated in all their criticism of it initially.
Well, I just want to say that, for better or for worse, Oslo maybe is referenced now because it's the only thing on the table that seems like a concrete plan from both sides to peace. Well, so naivete or not, there's nothing wrong with hoping for a peace plan, is there?
Well, no, I don't think. Well, it's like jumping off a 20-story building and hoping you'll sprout wings. I don't think that. I don't think that there's any chance of coming to an amicable agreement with the Palestinians in the near future, barring really dramatic surprises. And I really think it's time to look for other alternatives, which I've been promoting for the last quarter of a century.
Well, we'll see where we are in another 25 years. Dr. Sherman, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Of course. Since the start of 2018, several disturbing allegations against Israel's Shin Bet security services have come out regarding the blacklisting and interrogation of BDS supporting groups and individuals. Most recently, reports of the Shin Bet detaining and threatening arrivals in the country have been made, and now Israel's Attorney General Avichai Mandelblit is calling for investigations. The pressure to investigate really began earlier this week after reports came out about American-Iranian author Reza Aslan being stopped, questioned, and threatened on the Israeli border with Jordan 2 weeks ago. Aslan alleges that the Shin Bet officer pulled him aside away from his wife, parents-in-law, and children, and was questioned about his political affiliations. He was reportedly asked about his thoughts on the Prime Minister and about Israel's right to exist, as well as for a list of names of Palestinians, journalists, and other organizations that he associates with. Aslan also says that throughout the whole ordeal, interrogators threatened to detain him indefinitely, keeping him away from his family. Aslan wrote that a female Shin Bet officer, following hours of questioning, said, quote, "I may let you into Israel, but I may not let you out. I will keep you here and kick out your family. It depends on you. You would miss your kids, yes?" Aslan said that he retorted by replying, quote, "That, my friends, is the classic police-state trick, and that Iran has perfected it." Then, earlier this week, Jewish-American journalist and Israel critic Peter Beinart was detained at Ben Gurion Airport. Beinart was apparently on the way to his niece's bat mitzvah celebration with his wife and 2 children when he too was pulled aside for a so-called extra screening. He alleges that before he was released, he was asked about his politics, his involvement in protests in Hebron, and his association to groups that might advocate violence, threaten democracy, or otherwise promote anarchy in Israel. That being said, some, like Attorney Colonel Liron Liban from the Israel Democracy Institute, say that a distinction must be drawn between questioning to prevent terror and ensuring security on planes and questioning people who oppose the policies of the State of Israel. Indeed, the investigations and interrogations aren't always so seemingly random and biased. Just last month, Belgian-Palestinian Mustafa Khaled Awad was arrested while trying to enter Israel for being a member of the PFLP terror organization, which he's been involved with since at least 2010. Top government ministers are convening an emergency meeting today to discuss a troubling outbreak of leptospirosis in northern Israel. This is a particularly dangerous and sometimes fatal disease that seems to have made its way into Golan water sources and streams, and so far 42 cases have been confirmed here in Israel, a number that may spike in the coming days if left unchecked. For those unfamiliar with leptospirosis, the disease is transmitted through animal urine. Symptoms start off like a severe flu with fevers and chills, but can quickly evolve into the far more dangerous Wales disease. In those cases, the danger of kidney failure and bleeding throughout the major organs is a very real one. The Israeli Health Ministry has traced ground zero for this latest outbreak to Golan territory in northern Israel, where it so far seems contained. The most likely cause seems to be a larger than typical presence of wild boars near the major Golan waterways, which may have passed the disease into the water by peeing in it. Israel's Nature and Parks Authority is working with the Health Ministry to filter, replenish, and monitor any contaminated waterways as quickly as possible. The public is advised to remain calm, and hopefully everything will be under control shortly. Israel's just been banned from competing in yet another international sporting event. Now, this particular ban is nothing new, but here's something that is, although Israeli athletes won't be allowed in. The Israeli app Move It is being welcomed with open arms, in fact. And here to explain this is ILTV's Aaron Porras. Aaron, which games are we talking about in this instance?
So we're talking about the 18th Asian Games, or the ASIAD, which is basically the Asia Olympics. The games were held every 4 years. They're organized by the Olympic Council of Asia and are recognized by the International Olympic Committee. Also, the sports involved are essentially the same, from archery and badminton to boxing and triathlons, weightlifting, water polo. Exactly. Now this year, the games will be held in the Indonesian city of Jakarta and Palembang. And as you said, Israel is not allowed to participate. In fact, we've been banned since the games in 1981. But now Move It, the public transport app, is welcome. More than welcome, actually. This year, Move It has been named the official mobility app for the games.
Right. Well, there is something more than a little ironic here, because these days it's almost impossible even to find any technology that isn't owed in some small part to Israeli innovation anyway.
That's true. You can't really use your cell phone or the internet or your laptop or any smart technology without utilizing Israeli-made tech in some way. And that's probably exactly why Move It has been named the official mobility app for the ASIAD. The app is used all over the world to help people, especially visitors, get to and from places on time. And Israel wasn't banned from the games because they were on the border of a different continent or something like that. It was because Israel was voted out by in 81 by the Olympic Council of Asia, and then Palestine, meanwhile, is invited. So the hypocrisy is just a little bit funny, though.
Sure. Well, politics aside, Move It is one of the biggest Israeli apps used all over the world. I just traveled. I used it in a foreign country in English, in Hebrew. You can use it in any language you want, and it's what is it? It's available in Indonesian, I think, Chinese, Japanese, Malay, Hindi, Thai, more. It's even been tested for major sporting events like the 2016 Rio Olympics.
Yeah, it's already been used.
Yeah, so it's a tragedy. Israeli athletes can't come now, but
it's just a weird little balance, I guess.
Sure. Aaron, thanks for your report.
Thank you.
Nobel Peace Prize laureate and former United Nations Secretary General Kofi Annan passed away Saturday morning in a hospital in Bern, Switzerland. He was 80 years old at the time. According to the Kofi Annan Foundation, he died peacefully after a short illness. Nobel Peace Prize laureate and former United Nations Secretary General Kofi Annan passed away Saturday morning in a hospital in Bern, Switzerland, and he was 80 years old at the time. According to the Kofi Annan Foundation, he died peacefully after a short illness, and leaders from around the world and across the entire ideological spectrum have paid their respects. Current UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has eulogized his predecessor, saying in many ways Kofi Annan was the United Nations, and that he rose through the ranks to lead the organization into the new millennium with matchless dignity and determination. Prime Minister Netanyahu tweeted out his message of sorrow as well, writing, quote, "We will remember him as having been very active in the international arena and as someone who fought anti-Semitism and Holocaust denial. We send our condolences to his widow and family," end quote. Annan, of Ghanaian nationality, was the first black African to ever assume the role of UN Secretary General. He dedicated his career before and after his election as UN Secretary General to creating dialogue and fostering conditions for peace. And on that note, he will surely be missed. An Israeli hospital is about to become the first in the country to introduce an ingenious new way to fight cancer. The technology is used in a process called cryoablation, and it essentially finds tumors with an ultrasound, freezes them into oblivion, and then dissolves them harmlessly into the body, all without any invasive surgery or hospitalization at all. This revolutionary tech was developed by IceCure Medical Limited, an Israeli company based in Caesarea. Now, the procedure has already been approved for use in the US and the EU, but this will be its first official medical use here in Israel. IceCure's specialized probe is inserted into the body and tracks down tumors using precision-guided ultrasound scans. Liquid nitrogen is then injected into the tumor, freezing it almost instantly on contact. And this entire procedure leaves relatively no scars, is far less invasive than your typical surgery, and best of all, it takes around 20 to 40 minutes. The frozen tumor eventually breaks up and dissolves harmlessly into the body. For now, it's only going to be used in one hospital in Israel, the private Elisha Medical Center in Haifa. But if the procedure is as successful as promised, I have a feeling we'll be seeing it all over the country in a matter of months. And doctors plan to use it only in cases of benign breast tumors in women under 30. But again, if those results in the field are positive, we can probably expect to see that use expand to all kinds of tumors, which means that doctors may have a vital new weapon in the fight against cancer. Now here's a treat for anyone with a case of the munchies. An Israeli ice cream guru has just released a new flavor of the delicious frozen treat, cannabis-flavored ice cream. Now, if you're wondering, hey, what does cannabis taste like? To begin with, you're not alone there, considering that cannabis is typically not eaten raw. But after months of experimenting in his lab, the maker of this new flavor says that he has finally cracked it, and no, it does not include any actual marijuana, guys. Itai Rogozinski is the owner and chief glacier of the Vaniglia ice cream and gelato chain here in Israel, and he's known across the country for offering delicious summer treats using all natural ingredients. His new cannabis-flavored blend has gone through several stages on its way to your cone. The first version included hemp seed oil and plant chlorophyll. That was soon replaced by a blend of all herbs and nuts to finally arrive at what one assumes is the flavor of cannabis. But just so there's no confusion here, we're talking about a flavor of ice cream, as opposed to cannabis-infused snacks and drinks that can be found elsewhere in the world. Though the World Health Organization may soon revoke cannabis' status as a controlled substance, a number of nations and U.S. states have already approved the once-taboo plan for medical and recreational use. In some American cities, an extra $1 or $2 can even buy you a cup of coffee infused with cannabis' psychoactive chemical element, CBD oil. For now, Israel's first cannabis-flavored ice cream does not include this additive, but that'll all change as soon as the government gives the go-ahead. Israel is, of course, known as one of the pioneers of cannabis's medical benefits. Israeli doctors have created cutting-edge treatments for MS, cancer, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, and many more, all based from the cannabis plant. Given these medical benefits, many believe that CBD will soon become the go-to ingredient in everything from our milk to our beer, our water, and yes, vitamins. Now, the jury is still split over the taste of this new ice cream flavor, but whether you love it or hate it, you can probably expect to see more just like it popping up in ice cream vendors and parlors all over the world. Just 2 months before her wedding, an Israeli woman named Roni Cohen received the worst kind of news. She was diagnosed with an extremely aggressive form of leukemia. Needless to say, this discovery put her and her fiance's immediate plans on hold. But news of Roni's story quickly captured the country's attention and has rallied a grassroots effort to find a rare bone marrow match for the young bride-to-be. Take a look at this.
אני רוני כהן, בת 27. בשנתיים וחצי האחרונות אני גרה בהוד השרון עם בר, שהיינו אמורים להתחתן עוד חודש, בספטמבר.
כבר עשינו הכל, כבר בחרנו פרחים, כבר בחרנו מוזיקה, בחרנו אולם.
השמלה היה מקום, זמנות, הכל היה סגור. ולצערי היינו צריכים לבטל הכל. גילינו שיש לי סרטן הדם, לוקמיה. אני זקוקה לכם. אם אתם ממוצא משולב של תימנים ומרוקאים, או תימני עם יוצאי עדות צפון אפריקה, אני קוראת לכם לצאת ולתת דגימת רוק פשוטה. היא יכולה להציל את החיים שלי ושל עוד חולים אחרים.
ILTV's Emmanuel Kadosh is here with all the details on this story.
Yes.
Awful.
I honestly, I don't know if I'm going to get through this interview 100% without tearing up. This was a very, very, very touching story. And all over social media, you're seeing politicians, celebrities, social media influencers.
Yeah, the news,
posting,
everyone.
Exactly,
Yeah.
posting the poster of her face. You know, you see her, she's 27 years old, and her and her boyfriend or fiance are it's just so devastating. But just a little bit of background for those who don't know Roni's story. Just last June, literally the June that passed, she was having a lot of pains in her neck, and her body, and like all over. She didn't know what was going on. She kept going to doctors. They kept giving her antibiotics, sending her back home. The pain wasn't going away. She went to a doctor finally, just 2.5 months before her wedding. And they diagnosed her with AML, I don't want to say this incorrectly, acute myeloid leukemia,
Right.
which was just devastating.
AML is really rough. Now, it's certainly not the biggest, most common type of
Right.
cancer. It's not completely rare. I think over 100,000 people die a year from this cancer, but what makes it tough is that it infects the bone marrow, and to
Right.
get a proper filtering, a transfusion, you have to get the proper donor match from bone marrow, because it comes from stem cells from bone marrow. So.
Right. So clearly, we both know, just because we know, a little bit of the story, how difficult it really is to find a match.
How scary.
Went through the database here in Israel. Worldwide, they could not find a match for this poor girl. They are opening stations. They've opened it since 7 o'clock in the morning. They have opened stations for people. As you can see here, it's a saliva test. It's super simple, not invasive. Takes 2 minutes of your time to just test it out. They are really specific, obviously, because of who she is and what they're looking for.
Type of descent.
They're looking for half Yemenite, half Moroccan, or fully Yemenite, or half Yemenite and from North African descent.
Okay.
Now, I wish I could do it. I called in earlier today. I'm fully Moroccan, I was going to say unfortunately, not unfortunately, but in this case, yes, unfortunately. They will turn away, people who
if
aren't.
You're never gonna,
just because it won't really help.
Save time.
But at the same time, I did call them, and they did say it is important for people to just come out and do it anyway, so that they are in the system, maybe not at these specific, booths or anything like that, but it is super important for people to have your data, in the system for, cases like this that might happen in the future.
Sure.
There was an interview between her and her fiance, I want to say Bar, his name is, I don't want to say it incorrectly, where it's just, you see the two and they're just young 27-year-olds and they're just super excited to start their lives and something like this happens, and they're ready to find a match and they're ready to get married. So all we can really do is just have people, go out, get tested, and get awareness of the whole story and the whole situation.
Yeah, well, you guys have heard it here. If you think you may be a match somewhere, I saw one station on my way to work.
Right.
I see signs
There's
everywhere
a website,
on posters.
There's a website and a call center that you can call, ask all the questions. I asked if I was, eligible to even take part in it.
Right.
They told us where the stands are, where you can come, how long it takes. They're open from 7 in the morning till 7 at night. And I'm sure they wouldn't turn you away if you can't make it today. So, for certain people that can help really should. And it just
tough. We live in an age where I feel like every week I'm getting from friends or relatives like a Kickstarter to help raise money for bills. And Israel has a different healthcare system than the United States, so the cost of medical care is different here. But you see something like this where really it takes just a minute to go out and do something, saliva test, easy, and you can really literally save someone's life by doing it just by putting in the time to go find a place.
100%. It's actually really sad, the story that you just said, that they found, a way to treat cancer. It's just like everything, the technology is really getting fast and everything is really growing, and I just wish something like this, something so simple. It really does. And people need to just go out, get tested so that people have the opportunity to save their lives.
Well, we're definitely crossing our fingers on this.
Yes, for sure.
Emmanuel, thank you for sharing the story with us.
Thank you.
Yeah.
The Hebrew word of the day is brought to you by IDC Summer Ulpan, open to everyone.
Now for our Hebrew word of the day, an Israeli ice cream maker has just released cannabis-flavored ice cream, and that's all well and fine. But today's word is a love letter to my personal favorite frozen flavor, fistuk, or pistachio. So you'll find many delicious things fistuk flavored or pistachio flavored here in the Holy Land. Sweets and desserts from Arabic-speaking countries usually have fistuk either sprinkled on top like this, or they're baked into the yummy core. So next time you're here, you gotta try some kanafe with fusik in Jerusalem, or ornako maybe. I also highly recommend some fusik-laced baklava. Fusik ice cream also goes really, really great with Turkish coffee. That's just my tips, my advice, take it or leave it. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at the weather forecast. Tonight will be clear and warm with a low of 76 or 24 degrees Celsius, and tomorrow will be partly cloudy with little change in temperatures. The high should be around 88 or 31 degrees Celsius. All right, that's it for today's news. Today's exchange rate is 3.66 shekels to the American dollar. Remember to sign up for our daily newsletter at iltv.tv, and don't forget to follow us on Facebook at Israel English News, and of course on Twitter at ILTV News. I'm Brett Allen Smith. Thanks for watching.